24 lang tayong hinalal ng buong Pilipinas at hindi pa natin mapagkatiwalaan.
Our rules do not even make an exception. It does not even allow a senator to say, I will just repeat what I said.
That identified 8 or 9 senators, and there were names on that list. 8 or 9 senators who wanted to restore the confidential and intelligence fund.
Ang isa sa atin na pwedeng nag-leak, if indeed it was leaked by enemy.
As well. The broader implication of this, Mr. President, is the trust and confidence to the Senate. It's our credibility on the line.
Mr. President, yesterday we had an all senators caucus and we discussed lengthily the budget of the Republic of the Philippines. And just before we entered this august chamber, much to my dismay and much to our dismay, there was a news report that identified 8 or 9 senators, and there were names on that list. 8 or 9 senators who wanted to restore the confidential and intelligence fund of the Vice President and the Department of Education. And I wish to tell the people of the Philippines that there was no votation that happened yesterday with regard to the intelligence fund of the Vice President and the Department of Education. In fact, we had an executive session. And I do not know who of our colleagues who scooped or leaked our conversation to this media outlet. I have been a senator here for more than 10 years. And this is the first time that I encountered a scoop or a leakage. I do not know. I do not want to name names. This is a violation of our rules. And the majority floor leader will expound it later. Mr. President, we discussed lengthily for almost 2 hours the schedule, etc., of the budget of the Republic of the Philippines. We never touched or we never voted with regard to all the intelligence fund or confidential fund. In fact, we agreed unanimously to remove all the confidential and intelligence fund, not only that of the Office of the Vice President, including not only that of the Department of Education, but all security or civilian agencies na merong confidential and intelligence fund. Mr. President, nawala. I will just read. Sino mga pangalan? First on the list, Senator Robin Padilla, Christopher Bongo, Ramon Bong Revilla Jr., Ronald Bato de la Rosa, Jingo Estrada, Lito Lapid, Francis Tolentino, and Cynthia Villar. They are putting us in a bad light. And I condemn this. And I take offense on this. Nakalagay pa, Senator Pia Cayetano is said to be supportive of reinstating Duterte's confidential funds if she can justify the need for them. This is not true. And I hope Senator Pia Cayetano will agree with me. Yung mga ano. Just for a while, Mr. President, hinahanap pa ni Senator Robin yung mga nakasulat. Mahina raw yung wifi.
Ano ba tayo dito? Converge, PLDT, Secretary. DICT. Naku.
Mr. President,
Please proceed.
thank you, Mr. President. And if I may quote, an scooper told this media outlet that Senators Sani Angara, Francis Escudero, Rafi Tulfo, Aquilino Pimentel III, and Risa Hontiveros are allegedly against the reinstatement of Duterte's secret allocation, which are lodged under the Office of the Vice President and the Department of Education. Mali-mali po itong report, Mr. President. And I think Senator Angara must not be included in this list. And among the offices, Duterte's allocation was part of the 1.2 billion in confidential funds that the House realigned to agencies focused on the West Philippine Sea. Mr. President, tumayo po ako rito dahil masamang-masama po ang loob ko. I really felt insulted. And I think my other colleagues here also felt the same way, Mr. President. And Mr. President, I stand before you and I want to make this recommendation, maybe to talk to this media outlet or to summon this media outlet and ask them who among us violated our rules, who among us leaked what transpired in our executive session yesterday. That's all, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Jinggoy. Before I recognize the other members, I'd just like to put on record, I too am very disappointed. I have been a senator for 4 plus 6, 10, plus 2, 12 years, and a member of Congress for 9 years. And when we say executive session, we are bound by rules of both the House of Representatives and when I was in the House of Representatives and rules of the Senate when I was elected as a senator. Before I recognize the majority floor leader on the repercussions of violating that rules, I would just like to put on record as well that we had a healthy discussion. There was no voting that took place. There was a healthy discussion on how we will treat this budget, particularly on the confidential and intelligence funds. It's not fair to say that one group was for this and one group was for that because in the end, tama po sinabi ni Senator Estrada, we were unanimous in the committee report that the good gentleman from Aurora will be presenting today. We are in full support of his committee report. Now, I am very alarmed. As a matter of fact, that's why we were late. I usually try to start at 3 p.m. We had a meeting with the leadership, Senator Joel Villanueva and Senator Lauren Legarda. We met because of the implications of leakages during executive session. The executive department and very sensitive agencies of government may no longer divulge information to the executive session if they know somebody might leak it. That's why I take this very strongly, and I make sure, and I told the majority floor leader that I even called up Senator Nancy Binay because she is the head of the ethics committee, that we have to send a very strong signal that this shall not happen again. So, majority floor leader,
Yes, Mr. President. Before I give my statement, Mr. President, which I actually agree with your manifestation and the statements made by our dear colleague Senator Jinggoy Estrada. Senator Chis Escudero is seeking the floor to clarify something, Mr. President.
yes, Senator Escudero is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I agree 100% with what Senator Jinggoy Estrada said, that the account is not accurate and that is not what transpired in executive session. I hope, Senator Jinggoy, you and I will not be sanctioned for saying part of what happened, as you said, it was the unanimous consensus of the members of the Senate in executive session. So this is not the facts contained in the article, Mr. President, Your Honor, is not a leak. Chismis yun. So there is no leak to speak of really with respect to what truly transpired in the executive session, an attempt perhaps to create a story about it. But I confirm the statement of the good Senate President and the Senator Jinggoy that it was the unanimous position of the House, what Senate Senator Angara will be sponsoring today and the other vice chairpersons. That was the unanimous position of the Senate and all the members of the Senate.
Thank you, Senator Escudero. But before we ask our colleague to react, Senator Estrada, may we ask the Majority Floor Leader, what are the rules, particularly in executive session?
Yes, Mr. President.
So we are
Thank you
all
very-
clear.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, first of all, let me state and put into the records that I'm aghast of what happened, Mr. President. Whether this is leak or pure chismis, the fact that it came out, Mr. President, and it appears blow by blow, and unfortunately, Mr. President, the figures, the numbers, even the names that were mentioned were disoriented, Mr. President. I would just like to put into the record of this chamber, Mr. President, what our rules say about executive session. What's this? Rule on section 126 of our rules, Mr. President. Mr. President, section 129 of our rules, Mr. President, it states here, and I quote, any senator who violates the provisions contained in the preceding section may, by a 2/3 vote of all the senators, be expelled from the Senate. And if the violator is an official or employee of the Senate, he shall be dismissed. I'd like to put that on record, Mr. President, because at the end of the day, it's not just the leak or chismis that we're talking about here, and I agree with Senator Jinggoy Estrada being one of our veteran senator here in the Senate, Mr. President. It's more of the sanctity. It's more of the sanctity of the executive session. We continue to perform our duties and responsibilities here in the Senate. During committee hearings of Senator Bato, he would call for executive session. Paano ho tayong pagtitiwalaan ng mga nasa executive? Paano tayong pagtitiwalaan ng taong bayan kung ang ating executive session ay nangyayari po yung mga ganitong pangyayari, Mr. President. And so again, Mr. President, let me
And may I add, Majority Floor Leader, Section 28, the preceding section is very important. The President, as well as the senators and officials and employees of the Senate, shall absolutely refrain from divulging any of the confidential matters taken up by the Senate, and all proceedings which might have taken place in the Senate in connection with the said matters shall be likewise considered as strictly confidential until the Senate, by 2/3 vote of all its members, decides to lift the ban of secrecy.
Thank
So
you,
ganun
Mr.
katindi yung
Very
rules
clear.
natin.
Very clear, Mr. President. Crystal clear, Mr. President. Mr. President, Senator Jinggoy is seeking the floor. Move that
Yes,
to be
Senator
recognized.
Estrada.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to associate myself with the comments made by the Majority Leader. Kahit chismis yan or gossip yan, walang problema sa akin yan. Ang problema, bakit or paano lumabas sa isang media outlet yung mga nag-transpire sa ating usapin kahapon.
Yes.
That is, for me, that is the most important thing. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Senator, the Minority Floor Leader.
Senator Bato de la Rosa is seeking the floor.
Maybe we can give the Minority Floor Leader first if you don't mind, Senator.
Yes,
De La
Mr.
Rosa.
President. The Minority Leader, Mr.
Thank you,
President.
Mr. President. Ako nga, ngayon ko lang po nabasa, disappointed nga ako sa report eh. Kasi, ang sabi doon na against ako sa restoration ng CF ng Office of the Vice President. Tama yun, pero kulang. Kasi kahapon ako sinasabi ko, tanggalin din ang intelligence fund ng Office of the President. So kulang yung report, ipakidagdag sa report. Kasi the Office of the President is is a civilian office, not an armed agency, and not a uniformed agency. So kulang po, pakidagdag na lang.
You're not violating the rules because you're divulging your own position. Yes. So, yes, Senator Bato de la Rosa is recognized.
Mr. President, it is very unfortunate that this kind of incident happened within our midst. Number one, Mr. President, it creates distrust from among us 24 senators. Ibig sabihin, the next time around that we are going to have our caucus or executive session, hindi na ako basta-basta magsasalita. Baka mamaya, meron na naman maglilik sa media. So pangit po, 24 lang tayo dito na senador at hindi pa natin mapagkatiwalaan ang isa't isa natin, Mr. President. Number two, it tarnished the image of the Senate. 24 lang tayong hinalal ng buong Pilipinas at hindi pa natin mapagkatiwalaan ang isa sa atin na pwedeng nag-leak. If indeed, it was leaked by any member of the Senate. Kung ang nag-leak naman noon ay empleyado na nandoon sa loob, well, as a police officer, former police officer, Mr. President, I can vividly recall kung sinong nandoon sa loob. 2 staff ni Senator Angara. Mavic.
Oh, Attorney Mavic.
Attorney Mavic. At may isang kasama si Attorney Mavic na babae. So 4 silang nalaman ko na nandoon sa loob. Magprangkahan tayo dito. Dapat we have to made into account yung tao na responsable dito. Hindi lang na magsisend tayo ng stern warning sa kanila. Kundi the damage has been done. Lumabas na yung balita niya, nasira na kung sinong dapat masira, but I don't care kung masira ang reputasyon ko. Ang sa akin lang, ma-preserve yung ating reputasyon sa Senate. Hindi po maganda yung hindi tayo magkakatiwalaan dito. 24 lang tayo, Mr. President.
And the waiter staff, huwag mo kalimutan yung mga staff sa likod. Yung mga waiter din, yung nandun din
Isama
sila.
natin sa investigasyon
Isama
niya,
natin
Mr.
sila.
President.
So if the chamber wishes, I can ask Senator Nancy Binay, who is the chairperson of the Committee on Ethics, to look into this closely, if it is all right with the body.
Yes, I support, Mr. President, I support the call of Senator Jingo Estrada that yung source nitong news na ito, if it is a politiscope, he has to be called before a hearing para malaman natin kung sinong source niya. At kung hindi siya magsabi ng totoo, I will be the first one to move for the citing in contempt of that media personnel, Mr. President. Ikulong natin yan kung ayaw magsabi ng totoo. Mr. President, this is not a laughing matter. This is serious. Filipino people are watching us right now. Sabihin nila, ganyan na pala Senado ngayon, hindi ba pagkatiwalaan? Sila lang nag-uusap. Maglilik pa doon sa media. It's very dangerous, Mr. President. Very dangerous. Masyadong akong dismayado. Thank you, Mr. President.
We agree with the gentleman from Davao, and that's why after these proceedings, I will ask Senator Nancy Binay, Chair of the Committee on Ethics, to investigate the matter.
Yes, Mr. President.
After Senator, yes.
Mr. President.
May I move that the Senate Committee on Ethics conduct a hearing and invite the source of the news, Mr. President, so that everything will be cleared out.
Yes, we'll ask the majority floor leader to make the proper referral and motion.
Before we make the proper motion, Mr. President, may I just appeal to our dear colleagues to hear the sentiments of our
Other colleagues.
other colleagues. We have, Mr. President, Senator Pia Cayetano been waiting for quite a long time.
Senator Sherwin Gatchalian and Senator Lauren Legarda as well.
Senator Lauren also is here.
Mr. President, if I may, with the permission of my colleagues, may I request that we discuss this in caucus now, because by saying what is true or untrue in the reported publication online, we are speaking about the executive session. And let me just remind the body of Section 129 of the Rules of the Senate. It is not even a matter of whether it's published online or hard copy. The mere divulging the executive session minutes or any part of it who violates all the provisions in the executive session contained in the preceding sections by two-thirds vote may be expelled from the Senate. It is a very serious violation, Mr. President, by a senator or an officer or a staff in Rule, what is this?
129.
Yes, 129.
Section 129.
So, by saying that it is not true, or it is true in part, but in fact it is this and that, we are actually talking about the executive session. So it is my humble opinion, respectfully, I do not want to muzzle our colleagues, and if they want to speak on the floor, I leave it to your better judgment. But many of us feel strongly about this, and I respect the right of Senator Estrada for standing on the floor. But if we are going to speak about each and every line which was published, whether it is true or not, with all due respect to the publication which I've not read, may we discuss it in caucus in relation to 129 rule of the Senate. That is my humble suggestion. But I leave it to the members of the Senate if they want to speak about it in session. Thank you, Mr.
Yes.
President.
We understand that many of our colleagues feel slighted, feel angry, and we could allow them to express their personal opinions and release their emotions to this chamber. Yes, Senator Pia Cayetano's recognized.
Thank you. Mr. President, let me align myself with the observation and recommendation of the Senate President Pro Temp. I did not stand, I did not raise my hand with the intention of clearing any statement I made. I did not even read that. I don't bother reading those kind of articles. I don't. So, nung nabanggit pa yung pangalan ko, nagugulat lang ako kasi I don't bother reading those articles and I won't comment on it. What I will say is this. I will say it not because I'm repeating what I said in caucus, because I agree with Senate President Pro Temp that let's discuss it there. Because if our rules do not even make an exception. It does not even allow a senator to say, I will just repeat what I said. Walang ganon exception, Majority Floor Leader, correct? So I cannot stand up here and said, I will just be responsible for my statement. Ito po yung sinabi ko. Hindi tayo allowed, walang exception sa rules natin na tumayo ang isang senador at sabihin, yung akin pong sinabi doon, ito. Kasi hindi naman magkaroon ng opportunity yung ibang 23 senators to explain what they said or what they thought. Because precisely the rule is, lahat tayo tahimik. At kaya ang parusa doon, yung pinakamabigat na parusa na expulsion from the Senate. So, ang puntos ko ay simple. Chairman ako ng isang mahalagang committee na naghihiring ng budget na yan. DepEd, CHED, DOH, and attached agencies. So, on the issue of confidential funds, intelligence funds, or kung ano pa man, ako gusto ko, tanungin ng mga senador sa floor, yung mga tanong nila tungkol doon, para makapagdesisyon ang bawat senador kung ano ang tingin niyang nararapat na gawin sa mga pondong yan. Confidential, non-confidential, anything. So, yun yung gusto kong klase na diskusyon. So, kung nagkaroon tayo ng executive session na napag-usapan man ng ganon, hindi nga dapat lumalabas yon kasi nga, ang mga subcommittee chairman na katulad ko ay magre-recommend sa chairman na si Senator Angara kung ano dapat gawin sa mga pondong yon. Hindi ko naman didesisyonan mag-isa yon. Didesisyonan ko yon based on the debates. I would like to be educated properly based on the rules of the Senate. Gusto ko marinig yung posisyon ng Minority Floor Leader, ng Deputy Minority Floor Leader, ng Senate President, ng Senate President Pro Temp, ng mga baguhan na senator. Gusto ko marinig lahat yon. Ano ang paniwala nyo tungkol dito sa mga iba-ibang pondo and what will we do about it? Tapos, iharap natin sa taong bayan kung ano desisyon natin. So kaya nga, and I'm explaining this because the students, the young people, the old people who will now care to comment, bakit ba may executive session? Bakit ba kayo nagsisikreto? Wala naman kaming balak isikreto. Ilalabas nga yun. Pero minsan may mga diskusyon na gusto natin marinig yung opinion ng bawat isa na walang titigil nung, kunyari, gusto kong magtanong ng, it's a stupid question. Pero tatanungin ko na, di ako mahihiya. Diba? Aminin natin, minsan nahihiya tayong magtanong dahil, kasi bago lang ako. Di, kaya kami executive session para lahat pwedeng maitanong, lahat pwedeng mailabas. Kaya dapat sikreto yun. And then at the right time, mapapag-usapan. I wanted to explain that lang, Mr. President, for the benefit of those watching us. Kasi ang puntos is, bakit kayo may executive session? Bakit kayo may tinatago? Wala akong tinatago. Nagdidiskusyon ng maayos para bang magulang. Let's say, for example, na wala tong nangyaring ganito sisermo na ni Senate President o kaya ni Senate President Pro Temp ako, sisermo na nila ako. They will do that in private. In the executive session, ay Pia, di mo naintindihan. So gagawin namin yun in private para pagdating to sa public, ganun ba? O sige, tatanungin ko na lang in public o kaya di ko na tatanungin dahil naipaliwanag nyo na. That's the reason among many other reasons kung bakit may executive session. I just wanted to explain that dahil ang puntos nito is bakit may executive session at bakit may mabigat na kaparusahan. Wala tayong tinatago. But the reason for the rules is because it is meant to be followed. It is not meant to be violated. So kung may nag-violate, magkaroon ng tamang due process, magkaroon ng hearing, magkaroon ng opportunity to explain, and then the proper penalty must be meted out. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Cayetano. Senator Gatchalian is recognized.
Mr. President, I just want to add from what Senator Bato mentioned and Senator Cayetano mentioned as well. The broader implication of this, Mr. President, is the trust and confidence to the Senate. It's our credibility on the line. And every budget hearing, normally, a lot of the security cluster, the National Defense, the Department of National Defense, the PNP, the NICA, all of them normally will request executive session so they can tell us what is the reality, the national security situation, national security matters, so that we can act accordingly. Leaks like this will hamper, will destroy our credibility, destroy our integrity, and it will now prevent the security agencies to give us the truth because they will have doubts in their minds whether the truth or whether information will be kept safe in the halls of the Senate. So, Mr. President, I would like to associate myself with the motion of Senator Bato that this should be looked at and investigated seriously because it's the Senate's credibility on the line, especially whenever departments request for executive sessions and whenever they divulge to us matters of national security. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. And that's why we had a meeting earlier with the leadership because we cannot take this lightly. And we have to investigate and make sure this does not happen again. Majority Floor Leader, would you like to make the proper motion?
Mr. President, may I just ask for a minute suspension?
Session suspended.